welcome to this interview. My name is Tom Reijner and I'm here with two scholars from Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam. On my left hand is Elena Ponzoni, welcome, and on my right hand is Halleh Ghorashi, also welcome. I start with you, Elena. Could you introduce yourself, please?
I'm Elena. I work as assistant professor at the Department of Sociology of the Vrije Universiteit. I lead the co-creation for Inclusive Knowledges Lab, which I hope we'll talk about. I'm interested in the development of knowledge from communities, like for instance communities of people with refugee backgrounds and other communities, which knowledge has been neglected often in mainstream knowledge production.
And then Halleh, could you please introduce yourself as well?
Yes, thank you. I don't know where to start when I have to introduce myself, but let's start with saying that I am a professor of diversity and the sociology department at the Vrije Universiteit. And some background maybe is interesting to know that I came to the Netherlands in 1988 as an asylum seeker from Iran. And, you know, I was activist in Iran, and being part of the Iranian Revolution of 1979 changed my life. So I had some dreams, but when I became a refugee, I didn't think that I can realize those dreams, but it happened. So I am living my dream, being a professor at the university.
And can you tell me more about what led to this professorship, and more specifically to this particular subject?
I was an activist in Iran, so I considered myself to be somebody who fought for democracy and freedom. And when I came to the Netherlands, the image of me as a refugee was that I am pitiful, helpless, a woman from Islamic country, so not so emancipated. So then I thought, you know, my dream was to go to academia. So when I started my work in academia and my research, my aim was to really work on the different narrative. So to show that the life stories of refugees like myself is much more complex, much more interesting than only focusing on the lack and what they miss. And that became my drive to continue in academia, and then steps happened, and then I got the recognition to be a professor, which is amazing.
The research was also very important for you personally.
Very important personally. And people even ask me how, when the negative images become and nowadays negative images of refugees is all over the place. At that time it wasn't that negative, it was more, you know, people need help. So it had a different kind of connotation. But nowadays, negativity is all over the place. So people sometimes ask me, how do you deal with it? And I always say, the fact that I'm academic and do research, and I feel that I can do something about it in society, gives me a good feeling. Yeah. So that is my way of dealing or coping with what is happening in society, which is quite scary sometimes.
Understood. And then Elena, how was that for you? How did your journey lead you here to what you're doing right now?
I came to the Netherlands in my early 20s. So as a young adult, and at first I was very enthusiastic about Dutch society. Coming from Italy, I had this image like, wow, this society in which many things work. In Italy, nothing works. And like this idea, also what I experienced was that people, and what really surprised me was that people here were very proud of their institutions, of the social systems of support. And I thought, wow, like in Italy, we have a lot of distrust in institutions also. But then getting to know the society better, I realized that actually, this system works very well, at least on paper, for some people. But there are also many people that are not so seen in the system, actually, and many experiences that are not taken into account when we create these stories about a very well inclusive society. And that actually this image that I received very strongly as a migrant from Europe was constructed and kept in place by many people with privilege. And also discovered that I was actually part of that, you know, as a migrant, the European migrant, received with a lot of welcome, and yeah, I could study, I could do so much. I was also part of this structure, actually, of privilege. And I started discovering actually all these kind of more subtle systems of exclusion that then also became very important in the work we do together, and especially what we call epistemic injustice, so injustice when it comes to knowledge. For instance, at that time, when I came to the Netherlands, in the Netherlands it was a very common frame, also in the social sciences and also in policy, that yes, there were problems with discrimination, but for instance, racism was not a frame through which we could look at Dutch society because there was no racism. That is different, very different now. But actually, my encounter with this epistemic exclusion was more when I started working with Halleh, and we were talking and working around experiences of people that had fled, people with refugee background, which were, as Ali also explained now, really not taken into account in these frames of deficit through which society was looking at their existence, actually.
But how did this journey feel personally for you? I mean, how was it?
Yes, well, personally, it was a very beautiful journey, but of course, it also included struggle. I think there is a part of, you know, what we call white guilt somehow, of discovering that you're part of these structures of privilege, being disoriented, also thinking like how, you know, I couldn't see these things earlier. But I think, you know, this discomfort also brings a call for action and a call for, it was really a strong drive for me to also try to embed yourself in other networks, work with other people, other communities that help you also overcome a certain blindness that comes with privilege. And at the other side, also embracing my own migrant background, because I'm also a migrant. So that also means embracing what we call the in-betweenness, you know, the fact that you come from somewhere else. You can also look at structures differently. You don't take for granted what others take for granted, and make that also an important part of the relations with others.
I see some common ground, because for the both of you, research was very important
Yes.
in your personal journey, so to say. Yeah. Okay, let's go to the research itself. Halleh, you co-founded the Refugee Academy together with Elena, but based on your work. Could you tell us more about this initiative?
When I started doing research, the first idea I had was actually we need to bring in the narratives of refugees and make them much more present in the public debate. So if people get, you know, encounter these narratives and understand that refugees have much more to say and to offer to society, then we can solve a lot of problems. But at some point I realized that doesn't work if you collect these narratives, but there is nobody who listens. There is nobody who wants to do something with it. And we saw that actually very strongly in 2015, when this idea of what's called asylum crisis, which we call governmental crisis, happened. A lot of refugees came to the Netherlands, and then we saw the impossibility of institutions to deal with that. And then we saw actually also the civil society actors started to, you know, take the role, say, we want to have a part in this, you know, in this situation where you see that institutions are paralyzed, but we want to show our view, and we want to show that we have an alternative way to deal with this situation. But what we saw from the university, that there was no patience to really look around and see what the others are doing, to look back to see what have been done. So what we thought, actually, we have to start with something, a kind of academy, which is the name became Academy, Refugee Academy, to bring all these knowledges and experiences together. But not only that, to also connect all these different kind of knowledge and experience and, you know, competences, institutional knowledge, professional knowledge of NGOs, but also centrally the refugee knowledges, that people who go through these policies, what are their experiences? And to center that in our Refugee Academy, to bring all these positions together and create different horizons, different backgrounds, different perspectives, to connect them and learn, create a kind of learning structure,
so
co-learning structure.
So Elena, it was a whole new concept then. Could you say that? I mean, a new...
I don't know if it's, I mean, for me, it was certainly new, like this idea of, you know, bringing these different voices together. And very often when you try to do that as a researcher, you are very much in the lead of, you know, producing then a common narrative. You can maybe interview different people and then bring it together. But we try to like literally bring people together in a lot of discussions and like, yeah, these co-creative structures in which we try to connect knowledges and create, yeah, many different kind of products, not just articles, but events, reports, more video, or, you know, we've been working with drawings, with more creative materials as well. What I also would like to stress is that we've been working with different communities, different actors, and one thing that I think was also very important for us was the connection with refugee-led organizations. We've been looking very much at this, you know, ecosystem of organizations actually that are all involved with refugees. But especially, I think, in the last years, this connection with the refugee-led groups, which really bring a different kind of voice, a different kind of experience. For me, it was very, very inspiring. And that led us also to being partners in the Refugee Welcome Week that took place 2 weeks ago from the 16th to the 22nd of July. And it was really a very, very intense experience because it's brought together artists, scholars, activists, community leaders, musicians, cooks, like all people with lived experience that were like connecting their knowledges together. So if you see, like Halleh was saying, there are still a lot of people that want to welcome refugees and that are, you know, willing to support, to create structures of support, but still the images to which we are like collectively exposed, like the most positive image is still that of, you know, refugee as somebody who is receiving help, who is willing to integrate, who's willing to learn the language, to work hard. But in this kind of events, you really saw something really different, you know, from the idea of radical hope, which is the connection with really community wisdom of resistance.
Is this also part of the idea of the co-creation for inclusive knowledge lab?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Okay.
So we can go there, but
I want to go because of the limited time, of course. So I want to go back to the just short about the establishment of this lab.
The co-creation lab is actually, the idea is to take this way of working, of looking at research and the role of the researchers that we have experienced within Refugee Academy in connection to many other partners, and make it broader. So make it not just about refugee communities or about forced migration, but to extend it to people working on many different teams that are generally still connected to inequality, to structures of exclusion, or to social justice, which are all topics that very often we tend to take the communities that live these situations as objects of research.
It's very important.
Exactly.
That's the core of it, basically.
Yeah. The core is the idea of change that and trying to see communities and people with experiential knowledge as carriers of knowledge of their own world, and also look at the power of more collective forms of knowledge, and as in Refugee Academy, connect these to other types of knowledge. So that's the idea of co-creation.
Halleh, I want to turn to you about this approach, so to say. It's called grassroots science, or amplify power of collective knowledge from below. Could you maybe also elaborate on this very particular approach?
Most of the time, at the top of the ladder, we see the academic knowledge, institutional knowledge, which is taken for granted when decision-making takes place, about the communities that the decision is made for. But what we don't see is that what happens to the community knowledges, because lots of communities, and that is very interesting to consider, they survive in spite of very limited resources. We often, the advantaged people, the people who are privileged, they offer complain about everything, but they have a lot of resources. People on the ground, the grassroots, communities, they survive and they keep their dignity with a very limited resources.
Yeah.
So for us is that what can we learn from the communities? It's not that we bring knowledge to communities, but it is about, co-creation is about creating this kind of equal possibility of learning from each other, and especially learning from communities. And when you do that, your decisions in terms of policy, in terms of research, are much more connected to what is needed on the ground than something you think they need. And that is a kind of shifting the position and also being much more, I would say, humble as academics, and not see that our role is to bring knowledge, but our role is to create conditions so that we co-create knowledge, learn from each other. And from that, when you bring all these knowledges together, that is the only way you can address these complex issues we are dealing with. That is one. And second, in the time that there is a lot of distrust from communities to people in position of power.
We also live in times of
polarization.
Populism, polarization.
Yes, exactly.
In what way do you feel that this particular research approach is under pressure because of these circumstances?
I would say that it has two faces. On the one side, of course, you see that certain kind of concepts are becoming seen as something leftist or progressive, but the thing is that if you really want to solve this polarization, you have to think about where does it come from. And it comes from power relations. It comes from that the people in position that make decisions about a lot of other people, actually they don't connect. So this disconnection leads to distrust. So what we do with our research is we stay closer and see the added value of community knowledges for the work we are doing as academics, but also for the decisions that are made by policymakers and other institutional actors.
And Elena, do you also see like a role as a scientist in strengthening democracy in a somewhat different form?
Democracy, yes. If you see the power of democracy as really caring for like the forgotten knowledges as well. So this, for instance, the idea of deep democracies, that you really have to connect and make, exactly like what Halleh was saying, actually make conditions for different perspectives actually to be articulated. And since we live in society, like every society has structures of power, not every perspective can be articulated as easily, because there are frames that are dominant in research, in policy, in society, that make it much easier to articulate certain perspectives, certain needs, certain experiences, certain community paths than others. So I think this kind of work really should sustain that articulation, which means making possible a different kind of democracy.
Especially in a time that hatred and anger is filling the public space, radical hope is about imagining a different future, that a different future is possible, and it might be a gamble, but it is betting in your future in that gamble. So in that sense, it is a very important concept to consider. And one example that came to me, realizing what is important, what the importance of what I'm doing, is that one of my friends who is has been very active in civil society, has a very high position. She was telling me, actually, I lost hope, because what have I done in the last 30 years? What happened? Because look at the world. And I said, no, I can't lose hope. You know why? Because I see different things. Maybe you are, from your position, much more engaged with institutional actors. In my position, because of our research, we are very much connected to communities. And as Elena mentioned, this Refugee Welcome Week is one example. There are so many other examples. You see what's happening in society, which is not presented or visible in the media. It's hopeful. It's a lot of positivity that we don't see. And that is really important in our work for ourselves, to stay hopeful and to see that our work matters.
Because what you see, I think, is like a lack of imagination. It somehow disappears.
Yes.
Because it's all based on like facts, and also quite a negative frame, discourse, I would say. So
It is exactly
Yes.
being inspired by what's happening on the ground, grassroots activities, people who are really trying to do everything in their power to stay connected, to mean something for each other. And seeing that is already feeding the imagination, and also imagining a different future starts from there.
So optimism and radical hope, is that?
And
connection.
Staying connected and learn from each other, learning, co-learning. No?
The idea of optimism, if I can just, because radical hope is just, it's very different from like naive optimism.
Yes.
It's to be critical about, it's really grounded in critical awareness about inequality, and from there imagining a different future, which is more equal.
Very nice.
So it's not just optimism.
Okay, then one final question, which may come to a surprise for you, but how do you unlock your potential together? I mean, what do you need for working together in this project?
What I remember that for me, always the inspiration was to have people around me that give me the inspiration to do this. And my students, you weren't directly my student, but students around me that are source of inspiration for me. And working together with Elena, we have been doing it for a long time, helped me to stay sane and believe that this is really working. And the role of Elena in that, for me, was very crucial.
And for you, Elena?
Yes, I don't know where to start if I have to say what the role of Halleh was in my life. So it was, of course, a big inspiration, and also keeping me sharp on many things. But I think building also care as part of research for me is very important. It's not easy. We've been failing at that as well, but it's the idea of really nurturing relations of care and making a space which is safe enough also to challenge each other. For me, it's very important, and also. It's just not us two. I mean, there are many people around us doing this within Co-Creation Lab, within also Refugee Academy. And for me, exactly what Halleh was saying, being the fact that you are creating a space for not this individual excellence, but this like collective form of, well, I don't know if to call this excellence, but collective form of qualitative work that we're doing. That is, for me, that's very important. Yeah.
And we call it inclusive excellence, because most of the time the excellence is defined as something exclusive. But we do it together, and that's why it becomes excellent, because we are doing it together through caring and through learning.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for this interesting interview, and of course, good luck.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.